Thank you. All right. So yes, we'll start up with the Ontario Cup number 2 at Lappy. And to start off, we'll just go and take a look at the actual registration itself. And let's take a look at the edit form and see what kind of fields we've got. So they decide to have both athletes, coaches, and extra pass to dinner people all filling out the same form. We've been seeing this approach more often recently. It does make your form a little more complex because you're asking for sort of 2 different streams of information. But using the conditional logic, it can hide. So for instance, the categories, Friday, Saturday, Sunday races, they only appear if somebody says that they want to be a racer. So you can simplify your form stream depending on what people select at the very top. And certainly on the reporting side, it's not that hard to weed out, so the coaches aren't messing up your confirmation list and so on. So they've got 3 days of racing. They've got a category field for each of those. There's one particular field there I want to highlight. It's called I will be racing the U20 Canterbury Games categories. There's a yes/no option here. That'll come into play later in the race results. So I just want to highlight that one here. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday are our category fields. And so that's a pretty standard setup there. We'll go take a look at the confirmation list. So the confirmation list is a public report that you create and you share so that people can check who's registered. Key fields here are the name, club, team, bib pickup, who's coming to pick up the bib for the racers, license information, which days they're racing, and they should have points on here. I don't see the points fields, but that could be added. And then they're separated by putting the coaches here at the bottom. So it's not a bad confirmation list. Okay, so we'll go ahead and now start to create a race out of this registration. So from my home, I'm going to click set up race timing right here at the top. Okay. Okay, cross-country skiing. Al, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, your screen is not shared at my end, certainly. I mean, it's in the thumbnails, but it's not a full shared screen.
I think you have to click pin. Is other people having that problem, or everyone else can see it?
I'll click your 3 dots again and change your layout.
I'll do that.
Okay. So so I could choose cross-country skiing as a sport. And once I've chosen the sport, I have very specific templates that come up as a result. So I've got mass start, sprint qualifier, standard race, interval start. These all have logic attached to them, as well as specific seating that gets attached to it. So in this case, I'm going to choose interval start. I'm going to call this one our O-Cup test 2. And the date I'll say is today. And there's the organization. And the racers come from that registration that we just chose. And categories. Now it asks you choose a category field from registration. In this case, I want to demonstrate more concepts about the race timing application, so I don't want to create any categories. So I said, don't create any groups yet. We're going to do that in the actual race timing program. And then it has this concept of a standard race fields. I'm just gonna click this link just to show it right now, but normally you wouldn't ever go in here. It automatically recognized that the registration had a birth date field, and it automatically recognized that a gender field. There are some situations where you might pre-assign bib numbers or timing chips in the registration itself. It's not that common, but if it ever does happen, you can map those special fields into the race system using the standard fields. You can say, I've got an actual race number, and this is the field, and you can map things that way. So you wouldn't typically do it for skiing, but the possibility is there. So here we're creating a race. Okay, the very first question at the top says this race includes the CPL points field. So it recognized the fact that it had special logic regarding the Nordic Canada racing license. And it says, do you want to grant access to Nordic Canada staff for the purposes of points processing after the race? So if you're running a sanctioned race that needs to go into the CPL system, it's very important that you say grant CC staff access, and this allows them to produce CPL points out of it. Okay, we'll go into first tab, the settings. We've got the name, city, the date and time of the race. The race window right here is quite critical because it's the time period where this race is actually going to be processing times. If you have times coming into this race at say 5 o'clock, you're just simply not going to see them here. So make sure that this race window is fairly accurate. And if your race starts at 8 o'clock, I want my race window to start at say 6 or 7 because I'm starting to set up and test equipment an hour or 2 hours ahead of time. And so I do want to see those times coming into the race file that early. Okay. This sync server box is if you have a server box on site, you can create the races on the web, sync it to the server so that they appear on the server. And there's other options here we can go into later. Let's take a look at racers. You've got 184 racers that came from the registration. If I click on the 184, and I click on one of these racers, you can see all the fields that came directly from the registration. So again, that first question, what would you like to do? Register as an athlete, register as a coach, pass a dinner. And so all the options came. And the way in which, if people have experience with the old timing software, one of the major things that is different in the new software is that the new software works with whatever fields you've handed it. So if your registration has got 5 fields, that's what it works with. If you've got 100 fields, it works with that. And how you create your start list is totally dependent on how you set up your registration. So that's certainly one of the reasons why we review your registrations to make sure it's been set up properly and it will flow through for intended purpose later as races. Here you see your Friday sprint, your Saturday and your Sunday categories. Okay, so that's all coming from registration. One of the things that let's go ahead and these unnamed racers were probably just extra blank rows that got created in the registration. So if we want to, we can just delete them, get rid of them, and that's fine. 183. Okay. Let's go ahead and start creating our start list. So on the start list tab, the very first question is, how do you want to split your racers? And in this case, because this is the Friday race, we're going to choose that Friday category. So here's the Friday sprint classic sprints race. So I can choose this. And here's all the options that were in that category, along with the number of people in each of those options. And in particular, you'll see here, no Friday classic, 67 people. So there's 67 people of those 184 that weren't going to race on Friday. And this is exactly the way it should look here. All right, so I'm going to say create the start list. And it's created all those groupings with all those people in it. And if I just click view start list right now, you'll see those people, senior women, 3 people, senior men, these people, and so on. So they're now already in those groupings. Now, one of the reasons you may ask is in racers, there's 183 people, but our start list is missing those 67 people. And the reason for that is if on race day or sort of a last minute change is made and you need to get somebody into that start list who, for whatever reason, force majeure, they were supposed to register, they didn't, I could find somebody, so here's somebody's probably actually a coach, and they want to jump into the this Friday race, and I can just set them like that. They're now in that category, and I don't have to change anything else. And if I go to my start list, that person will now be in the start list. There they are in the start list right there. So although the race file itself has got 183 people in it, the start list only has the people that selected the options that you grouped on for your start groups. Okay, but every race file will always have all the people in them. The next thing we're going to do is get into setting the order. So this is typically where you would go to your race notice, where you've got your schedule of events, and you want to drag and drop to reorder your category. So let's say you want to start off with your U14s. I'm going to put them at the top. U16s are going to go next. drag and drop to reorder, U18s. Okay, and then let's say that seniors and U20 are all going to be combined as one, as for the start list purposes. We may want to separate them later for results, but from a start perspective, they're going to start together. And this is an important concept in the new Zone 4 software if you're used to the old one. The old one had a concept of categories, and a category on the start was the same as the categories on courses and the same on results. And then new software does not have that rigid concept. We have the concept of a grouping for the start purposes, which are, here's the people that are going to start together in the same grouping. And you've got people who ski the same course. So that's another set of groupings, is course groupings. And then you've got result groupings. Yeah, so I'm gonna show that in a second here, Karen. So in this case, senior, we want to merge U18 boys, senior women, the seniors and U20. So I'm gonna say merge start groups. And this, I'm gonna say senior women, U20 women, and U18 girls. They're all gonna start together as if they're one category from a start perspective. So I say merge, okay? And then same with the men, and U18 men, merge, okay? And now I've got those groups merged on the start group. And I might want to call that something, I might just call that open women. And I'll call this an open men. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. So there's an example where I've merged people together for the start purposes. Now, you may totally separate them on results, that's fine. But you're saying, here's who's going to start together in the same group. Okay, and if we view our start list, we'll see that effect right here. U14, U16, open women, open men. Okay. All right, so now let's work on assigning race numbers. So this first screen you see is what I'd call the sort of the simple method, where you just say, I'm going to start with bib number 1. Let's say I want to reserve 5 bib numbers between each category, and just click assign race numbers. And it'll do it. But that's generally, if you're running any sort of a sanctioned race, you'll probably want to do something a little more complex. So let's just take a look at that. Bib 1 goes to 14. I put it in a five gap, so it just jumps and it keeps some reserved bibs on each one. Okay, but generally speaking, you want more control than that. So this little dot 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 here beside the button is, instead of saying for the whole race, say for each grouping, and you get this nice little grid. And here you can say, okay, U14 girls, yeah, I want them to start with bib 1, but there's and you say, okay, I don't want to reserve any, reserve none. I want the men to start at, instead of 20, I want to start them at, say, 15. Okay, and it tells you here what the last number is. So the last number here is 28. So I don't want to start the next one at 29. I want to start the next one at 31. This one's now at 48, so I'm going to go at 51. 63, so let's do 65. And see, as it's going, it's telling me what the highest one here is. I'll do 91. There, it goes under 26. Okay, so that's typically, because in general, we want the categories to start on an odd number, and typically starting on a 1. In this case, I let this one be a 15 and this one be a 65. But for the bigger jumps, I did it on the 1. Certainly in a mass start, you would definitely start it on the 1, so that your grid, your chevre on the first position is always a 1. So I'll assign those numbers. The other thing I think is important to note here is you see this order by field right here on the right-hand side. It says CPL individual start. When we created this race, it recognized the fact that from the registration, it already had a CPL field, points field, and license field. And when we created the race, we said we wanted to use the individual start template. Therefore, it automatically went and applied this special uses preset seating function, CPL individual start. And so that follows all of Nordic Canada's rules for doing the seating the way Nordic Canada says should be done with an individual start. So if I go down, say senior men will be a good example of this. The very first grouping here is people without license. The next grouping is people who have a license but no points. And then after that, it creates groupings based on the license. And there should be actually a seeding number. We should be able to see a seed here. I'm going to go and see if I can enable that. Configure display. Yeah, seed. Okay. I'll show you a bit more advanced stuff here. You'll notice here when I click configure display, if I want to choose to add fields, let's say I want to add club or team into my address. Notice I've got some fields here that are rather long. How many coaching bibs do you require? These came from the registration, and they're going to be annoying me all day. So for anybody who wants a pro tip, I go to racers, I say custom racer fields. Here's all the fields that I had in my registration, and you can see how long this one is here. Eh? So I'm just going to edit that one, call it coaches bibs, save it, get rid of this one too. Canada Winter Games, yes, no. This was Canada Winter Games was just a yes, no option. So I just changed it from an option field. So it says yes, no. And there's one more really long one here, trail pass. Okay, so now I've just got some nice, shorter, more concise column names. I can also reorder this list if I want to deal with like one field a lot more than another. I can reorder them. And this just makes when I go to the racer screen a lot simpler. So now now that I've reorganized that, I go to my racers. Now, here's the seed here. Oh yeah, I got to this. It should be the seed. Okay, let's go back to the start list. I'm also going to do one other advanced thing here. When you're building the start list and you're viewing the start list, when you configure what fields to see, you have control of this thing called racer fields to display. These are the fields that appear underneath the racer's name. So if I add, let's say province, I add club, I add team, and lots of things I could choose here. Let's see. University name and Nordic Canada license. Okay, you see how they appear underneath the racer's name? We call that the racer display fields. And the reason why they appear underneath the names is that nowadays almost everybody consumes start lists and results on their phones. And if your results are very like an Excel file and they're like tabular, where it's just going from left to right across a bunch of columns, it's not very friendly on people's phones. So by putting these fields that we call basically metadata on the second line, it makes it much more friendly for people on phones. That being said, there are some fields that are really important to have on the first line. So in this case, we've got the license fields and the points fields appearing in the first line. You can actually control that though. That is customizable. We just don't make it as a standard cut. So from a pro tips perspective, if we go to our settings, go to advanced settings, and enable unsupported and experimental settings. This enables you a lot more control and power. And now on my start list, configure start list, I have control over what fields. So I can get rid of FIS license because this is not a FIS race. And I could add, say, seed. Okay, so now I can see seed 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, when we talked about the Nordic Canada rules, they state that people that don't have a license, they end up in their own seed. So that they are on seed 4. People with a license, no points, they end up in their own seed as well. So they're in seed 3. And the remainder of the racers are split into certain seeds and grouped by them. So this is seed 1 with the best points, and seed 2 is the secondary points. And so now we can see how it's gone and taken care of the complexity of following the Nordic Canada rules for seeding. Okay, so let's continue on our configuration. So we've done our bib numbers, and that's taken care of our correct ordering of seeds. Now let's take a look at chips. So in chips, what you do is you enter the letters of the racks you have. So let's say I've got 2 racks, A and B, and you say assign timing chips. And it's pretty simple. It takes care of assigning it. It'll always try to put, you know, bib 1 with chip A1, bib 2 with A2, so that it makes it much easier to do handout. And yeah, so that's pretty straightforward, automatic. Next thing, let's do start times. So similar to the bibs, you could do it where you just do it for the whole race. You say, okay, first starts at 10 o'clock. It's 30-second intervals and a gap of 5 minutes between each category. And if you do that, it'll do exactly what you tell it. But generally speaking, that's not the control we actually want, because we want our gaps to be variable for ski races. So in this case, same thing, I'll go start time tools, and I'll say for each group. And again, I'll get a nice grid that I can work with. And I can say, okay, U14 girls, yes, I'm going to start them off at 10 and 30 seconds. But between the girls and the boys, let's say I actually don't want any gap at all. So I'm just going to leave that. Let's put it a 2-minute gap for the males. And U16 girls, we need a bigger gap here. So I could either put in a gap here of, let's say, 10 minutes, or I can just hard code the time over here. It's telling me what time it expects, 10, 23, 30. So let's say, okay, well, we want actually 7 minutes plus there's some change. So let's set to 10, 30, 30, 30, like that. Okay. And you work in it. Oh, that was 11, okay, 10. There we go. And then say it's 2 minutes again. So you can see I go back and forth between assigning a hard time or assigning a gap. And this gives you a lot of control here. So open women, I'm going to set them to start at 11, 30. And the men 13:30. And I'm going to have the men, we need to do a course change. So we're going to start the men at 12 and 30 seconds. And I click assign start times. And I view my start list. Okay, so here we go. 10 hours and 30 seconds, first racer. Just as a note, by convention, you want to start the racers off at gaps. Kyle's question about if you're adding something last minute and there's a gap. If I wanted to insert somebody right here at 07, I can insert somebody as long as I just didn't click the assign start times again. Yeah, like you don't have to click that button if you don't want to. So if I'm doing a last minute addition on race day, I'm not clicking any buttons on the screen. They're way too dangerous on race day. You don't have to. Okay. By convention, we start the first racer off at 30 seconds, not right at 10. The reason for that is that we want the odd number bibs to be starting on odd seconds. So if you're bib 1, you go at 30. If you're bib 3, you're going at 30, 5, 30, and so on. If you're an even number bib, you go out on the minute. And that's not a big deal if you only have 50 people in your race. But if you've got 600, like at a big race, you really want your volunteers at the start to get into rhythm. And it just becomes like, okay, they look at an even bib number, they know it's going on the minute. So that's why you're seeing this starting off at 30 seconds. And here I broke my rule here by putting in only a 2 minute. So let's say I want to go and adjust that. So bib 15 here is not going to be 2 minutes. It's going to be 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Assign start times, view start list. There it is, 29:30. Okay, that looks good. 16, 31 starting at 13:30. It looks good. 41, so I need to make this adjustment here. 10:41 is not right. So that's the same thing, put in a 30-second gap there. So you can see it's a very iterative process. You go back and forth, assign your start times, view the start list, go back, make your adjustments. And this is a much nicer, easier way to do it than the old software if you're used to it. Bib 65 starting 11:30, that's good. And then 91 starting at 30, good. Shows the first bib, guys. The first bib, you do see it above in the upper, this one right here. You see the first bibs right here. So yeah, so you know the times from, in this case, we generally speaking, you set up your bibs first, and then you set up your times after. So you generally like to get your bibs correct first before you get into your times. Okay, so now we've got our star list and we're happy with it. We want to do a couple things. Now, just backing up a second in terms of timing, timing of when we do this. Nationally, we've now gone to this idea that at 3 p.m. the day before the race, we publish the start list publicly, okay? But in order for you to get to that point where you've published this stuff publicly, you have to have given people, working backwards, you have to have given people a day to review a seating list, okay? So a seating list is different than the confirmation list. The confirmation list is something that's been open since the registration opened, and it's all about points and who's picking up my bibs and licenses, whereas the seating list is, here is how this race is actually going to be run, and here's the order that the racers are going to be. But a seating list does not include the start times or the bib numbers. And the reason for that is that if you do need to make an adjustment for any reason, or the jury needs to make an adjustment, you don't want anybody to have a copy of, oh, I thought I was starting, at 1 o'clock, and now you changed it, now I'm starting at noon. So a seating list is essentially a copy of the start list without the bibs and times. So now that I've built a start list, a draft start list, here's what happens. I go publish and print. I say post to zone 4, and I say post a draft start list, okay? And I get a URL here. And this draft I send to my jury and to my chief competition, like everybody in the jury, and you say, okay, here's the draft start list. And again, this is 24 hours before that 3 p.m. This is, let's say the Thursday now, Thursday in the middle of the day, you built this. And you say, here's my draft start list. Can you please review it and make sure that we're looking good here? And they're starting to look at gaps, looking at just overall structure, are things generally looking correct, okay? But you don't want the public to ever see this. And so by you setting it as a draft start list, that's not going public to on your event page. It's just going to whoever you share that URL with, okay? So I say save and close, and now I create a seating list. I do that by going on the Racers tab, and I create a new report here at the bottom. And creating reports here are very similar to creating reports in the registration side. You'll give it a name. You'll choose your columns. First name, club, team, and let me just go to my notes here. Seating list. We've got a great document, by the way, here that I'll share in the chat afterwards that tells us exactly what fields we want to include here. License, points, seed, year of birth, province, club, team. Okay. License. NC license, club team, points. We're using the CPL distance points in this one, and seed. There's all my fields. Okay, and how do I want to sort it by? I want to sort it by racer number. So even though we're not including the racer number, we do want it to be ordered by the number. And group by start group. Okay, we create the report. Now I'm going to need to make some modifications because I want to reorder some of this here. So before I do anything else, I'll say modify report. So I'll reorder here. So first name, last name, seed, club, team. So I'm going to move up my NC license and distance points, seed, club, team there. And then there's one more thing. If I view this report at the very bottom, because this is a report of all 183 people, at the very bottom of this report, you'll see no start group, nobody. So these are all the coaches and all the people that weren't racing that day. I don't want to include them in my seed list. So I say modify report. I put a condition on this report, which is, in this particular report, I want to say where racer number is not blank. So that's only going to include people in the report that have a racing number. Okay. So here's my report. And you can see it essentially looks like, if you compare this to the start list, it looks exactly the same, except it's tabular in nature and it doesn't include bibs and times. Okay, so here's my open men down here, and here's my report. Okay, and so that report is good to go. And so now I'm ready to share this publicly. This is what I want the coaches and the athletes to review to make sure that that everybody's accounted for, everybody's on there. So if I say modify report, and I say, oh yeah, report. Start list, very specific report. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I was looking right at my face. Here, share by link or share publicly. So there's the link right there. And if this is on an event page, this is going to show up on the event page as a public report. Okay, and generally speaking, you've also set up usually a WhatsApp group with all your coaches and athletes at typical races, and so you're also pushing this out to them, and you're pushing them out to them saying, hey, here's the seating list. You have until 12 noon tomorrow to submit all your changes. After that, no more changes. Could be publishing the start list at 3 o'clock. And so this is the link here you're going to send out to people. Okay, there's the public seating list you're going to send. Okay. Now, and then of course, over that 24 hours, you're going to be receiving feedback from the jury. You'll also be making changes as changes come in. As far as managing changes, there are two ways that you can deal with changes that get sent to you. If somebody lets to change, let's say they don't need to fix their club or team or bid pickup, you probably want to make that change in the registration because that's going to affect all of the races that you've created out of it. And if you make the change in the registration, you have the ability to resynchronize the registrants down into each race. So you don't have to go and manually make those changes in each race. So this little button here, import new racers from registration form, this allows you to import new, which is only import the new people who have registered since the last time you did it. In this case, we're creating this race file after the registration closed, so that would never be the case. For import all, re-imports everything across. And so that's a way to resynchronize changes if you're making them on the registration side. If the change that you're making, though, is only going to affect one race, then you're probably better off to make it here in the race. As long as you're not bouncing back and forth between the two concepts, though, because if you say resynchronize all and you have made a change in this race, that change would get overwritten with what was in the registration. So you kind of want to stick to one stream or the other, but there are definitely times where it's appropriate to do it one or the other. Generally speaking, once the race starts, we're never going to say resynchronize from the registration. I just never want to take that risk. I kind of want to say, no, we're in the race file, we're timing now, and on race day, we're only making changes in here. But in the lead up to race, especially if you have like 3 race files, all being derived from the same registration form, it may make sense to make the change in the registration first. Okay. Are there any questions about start list preparation? Because I feel like this is a good natural place to talk and just make sure we're clear on this stuff. Yep. Okay. All right, we'll keep going then. Right, so once 3 o'clock comes along, the jury has reviewed the start list and you're all good to go. You can say post to zone 4 and you say publish a final start list, and then it goes public. And generally speaking, once it's public, you're never touching your assigned bibs, assigned times, assigned chips again. Like that's done, it's locked in. You can make manual changes, but you really don't want to be making any wholesale changes. There is a bit more configuration that we could look at. Configure the start list display here. This allows us we can upload an image, a header image. So in this case, I'll take one here. Nice little header image. And then I can also set custom header fields. So this is where I'd put, say, the jury. And jury would have a section called, TD. And I'll say chief up. I've got, whatever, assistant, and so on. And so it's totally free form. There's no limit to how many sections you can create. So you can also have a weather section. Wind, light. So it's totally up to you how crazy you want to go with this number of sections and information. You can put sponsors in there. It's totally free form. The one thing to note is that whatever you define on your start list automatically gets used on your result sets. You can specify a separate header and images on specific result sets, but in general, you make it here and then you don't have to worry about it later. Okay. There's another one. We'll come back to that in a second. Yeah. User list. Okay. Next, we'll do the courses. So courses are how do I want to group people for the purposes of running the course? Now, in this case, the Friday race, it says classic sprint, but for the purposes of this demo, I'm pretending it's an individual start race, but I'll still choose that field, and it lists all of the groupings, and I'll say create these groupings. But now it's very important for me to consider this. When people race two different courses, they can never appear in the same result set, in the same result group, sorry. So in this case, I definitely want to, on some result sets, see that the seniors and U20s and U18s all race the same course together, because we group them together in the start. So it's very important we group them together at this point too. Anybody who's sharing that same course, you want to group together. We can always separate them for results later, but you want to make sure you group them, because it's impossible to group them later if they didn't ski the same course as far as this is concerned. So I'm going to say merge racer groups, and nowadays actually the women and men all do the same distances, right? So we could actually merge them together and put all of them together like this. And let's call this, like, say, the 10K. And then U16, I'm going to merge them as well, because they did the same course. Merge, and merge 14s, merge. And I'll call them the 5K, and U14 I'll call these 3 kilometers. Okay? All right, and the 10K is doing 2 laps, 5K is doing 1 lap, and they're doing 1 lap. Okay? I can also put a description here, so I can say the 10K is doing 2 times blue 5 kilometers. Okay, it's fine. I'm running this course so late at night that it's now outside my race window. So this is why I keep getting this warning saying, "Hey, the race is ended." So I'm going to go and boost my race window to say, actually, the race is still going on. It's going on until late tonight. There we go. Did I get that right? 2300, 19. Oh, I had it on the wrong day. Oh well. Sorry, I set this to start on the 19th. So that's a couple days ago. So I'll just have to ignore this warning here about it happening in the past. Okay, and then 5K here, I'll say 1 times blue 5 kilometers, and I'll do 1 times 3 kilometers green, let's say. Okay, and the reason why I'm putting this description here in the courses is that if I go and look at my start list, and now will put the course information underneath all the groupings that are doing that course. So I don't have to go and edit. Like, I could edit this group and put like extra information here for each start group, but that's not where you would put it. People have often made the mistake of putting course information there, but I'm showing you that if you put your course information here into this edit button on each course, it automatically will show up on your start list for anybody doing that course. Okay. Okay. So now we've done our merging. Next is timing device setup. This is where we select which devices are going to do what at which points. So at our start, when we click add a device, it lists all the devices that we've ever connected to. We've got summits, we've got phones, we've got activators. A typical race setup will have easy summit. So let's say summit 1 is at the start, and that's going to be our primary. If we want to, we can select the actual channel, but generally speaking, we try to keep one summit per role. Therefore, if you've got an A timer, a B timer, and a C timer, those are 3 separate summit timers, and therefore you're only going to use one channel per summit. And so the next thing I'll add is a backup device. And so I'll say summit 2, and I'll also probably have an activator out there, maybe if I have GoChip out there. And then if it's a fist race, I need a C timer. So let's say I'll do summit number 3. Okay, so I've got my time assignment device, summit 1. That will be the device so I'll do a bib number post on. So when the skier comes at the start, I look at their bib number, I type in bib number post, and when they start the gate, that trigger triggers the wand opening, triggers the time in the summit to send that bib number that I just posted in with that time. And that way it can be assigned automatically. By me saying it's a time assignment device, if a bib number comes in on that device, it will be automatically assigned to that racer. Okay. So the start is set up. Now for the lap, most likely I'm only going to have an activator, a GoChip activator there. Nowadays, we don't even put out summits usually as backup. But at a finish, we'll have a lot more devices. So we'll say, let's see, I'll take a summit number 4. That'll be my my photocells. Maybe I'll have a secondary photocell as well, and a third photocell or a manual plunger. Summit 5, and I'll have an activator as well. Okay, so I've got 3 summits and a GoChip activator. It'd be a more complicated race if I have to have a rapid cam, but let's say if I have a photo finish camera, there's all my devices. Okay, so that's how I set up my devices. What devices are going to be at which points? There's a key field here called min split. It's missed quite easily by a lot of people. Why this field is critical is that, let's say somebody starts the race, they go over the lap point, and then let's say they got confused and they went the wrong way and they came back across the lap point like 2 seconds later. If there's no min split, it'll just keep saying, oh, here's first lap, here's second lap, and they'll have a 2-second lap time. So a min split says, I will not assign another time for that person unless it's more than this time. So typically in a ski race, it's going to be at least 5 minutes. So here, if they go across the lap, it assigns them a lap time. It will not accept any more lap times for that person for 5 minutes. So it's a real safety switch that is critical to kind of ensuring that quite often too, we'll see stadium setups where they'll leave the start and then right away they'll go right beside another activator right over a lap lane like 10 seconds later. That's how a min split just deals with that situation. By putting a min split, you say, that doesn't matter. They'll cross that point, and then we won't actually assign it until they're much later in the race. Okay, let's see. Kyle, you had a question. Do you want to speak up that question? I just missed the first part of it.
Yeah, sorry. Does it still record the time somewhere in the system, just in case they went over, came back, and then you got to fix it later?
Yeah, for sure. You've got all the times there. Yeah,
okay.
No times are ever deleted. It's just what times are actually assigned.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. If you have to add any phones to your the GoChip times, the chips detect the activator field, electromagnetic field, and they transmit the times to a cell phone. So if you've installed the Zone 4 Go app on one of your phones, you just have to make sure you put in this pin code, which is your club's specific pin code. And that way, when the phone is transmitting information, it knows which club to send those. So this particular pin code is the Lakehead one. Each club will have their own pin code. Okay. So let's now move on to results. Okay, it suggests 3 result sets just by default, but for our purposes, I'm just going to hide these and start from scratch. And it's just suggesting that, hey, you can create an age group result set, an overall result sets, and results by gender. I would say that suggestion is more typical in, say, a running race. In a running race, you would have an overall 5K, 10K result set, but you also want to have an overall male-female 5K, 10K result set, as well as overall 5K, 10K, male-female, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30. So that's why it makes these suggestions. Okay, so I'm going to create a new result set. And the very first grouping that's always there by default and one you can't remove is your course. And this is why I said it's critical that you do your merging based on how people are actually going to ski this. So if I just created a result set right now based on the course, everybody, male, females, all of them together who did the 10K would all be in one results. And that's, of course, not what we want. So I'm going to choose, I could choose a gender, but typically you wouldn't. In a ski race like this, we're going to choose our Friday, go back to our Friday here, Friday Classic Sprint. Okay, and now it still kept the course there. Here's the 10K, the course. Now it's added all the different permutations of that. So I'm going to say create this result set. Okay, now this is actually an overall result set. So let's say like I actually don't want to have the Canada Games U20s separate from the seniors. Well, let's combine them. So same thing. If you go back to configure, and I say you want to merge racer groups. So let's take my seniors and let's merge my seniors with their women and girls there. Merge them together. And same thing with the men. Merge. Done. And I'll just rename that to say open women and open men. Okay. So there. Now I've got open women there and I've got open men. And these are still separate. So, but this is very typical in we'll call this an overall. What's very typical in cross-country skiing is you have people who want to see overall results. They want to see how they rank against everybody, but they also want to see how they rank just among their category. So in that case, I create another result set, and I'll call this category result sets. And along with course, I'll choose the Friday again. And this time, I don't want to do any merging. I'm just going to leave it as totally separate groupings there. So now the seniors are separate from the U20s. One of the interesting features of this ability to create multiple result sets is that when you're adding fields to display, so let's go and configure what fields we just show here. So racer fields, I'm going to add bib number, I'm going to add province, let's say, club, team. They always want Nordic Canada license on there. And at the very bottom here, you'll see I've got category results. So I can actually include the results from the other result set in the first result set. And so let's say you were third overall, but first in your subcategory. When I'm looking here at the overall results and I click view results, I would see my name saying, hey, I'm third here in open, but in the U18 girls, I was first. So it's a way to kind of show both sets of information on both result sets. Yeah, this was not definitely not possible before. And likewise, in the category result sets, I can do the inverse. I can say, let's add bib number, club, team, and see license, and now I can add the overall. So if I'm looking at I was first in senior women, but I was third overall. Okay. All right. Now that I've got my result sets built, I want to publish them. And one of the key things is I want to publish them the day before the race. And this is something that's very counterintuitive if you're used to the old software. With the new software, one of the overriding principles was how much can we configure the day before to save us from having to do it on race day? And publishing results and getting everything configured to the point where there's literally nothing left to do is a key part of this. And it's the best way to ensure that you're in good shape for the next day. The less you have to do on race day, the better, because you know you're going to be slammed with any number of things. And so we always recommend to click publish, post on zone 4 the day before the race. It also advertises the people who go to look at the start list will see, oh yeah, the results are already up. They can click on them and they can see, oh yeah, I'm correctly identified in the right subgrouping. So like, let's say you did have a Canada Winter Games category, and they can click on that result set saying, yeah, I can see my name is currently in that result grouping. So it's way better to catch these problems the day before than having to deal with it on race day. And the way I say it is that by pre-publishing everything, it's really obvious that the system is just simply waiting for times. It's primed, it's ready, there's no action required by you, it's just simply waiting for times. Obviously ski racing is a little more complicated than some races, but there's some races in the summertime where we do all this setup the day before. And we've had clubs look at this and say, well, I mean, I'm not going to make any changes on race day. Do I need to even have a laptop at the race on race day? Like, no, you could just have your phone and just look at the results. And sure enough, they go to the race, they don't have a printer, they don't have a laptop. All they have is their cell phone watching the results coming in, because there's nothing for the timer to do. The times are being processed automatically. So, and they weren't expecting any problems because they could just call us. We were doing remote timing in that case. So if they had any issue, they could just call saying, hey, this person did not finish or something. We could process it, but they actually didn't need to have a laptop on site to do anything. And so if you're used to the old software where you actually had to do all these steps, step 1 to 10, and you have to do some of those steps on race day, this concept of pre-setting up everything and just kind of sitting back and watching it is definitely going to be a bit to get used to. Yeah, go ahead.
So when you do set up all the timers and the chips, and you get like you miss to post a bib, for example, or you get like a double input from the photo finish laser beam, would that automatically compensate all of that out and everything is perfect, or you still have to add in, like in the old software, add in what actually happened, combine the times and verify them against one another?
Yeah, because ski racing still requires us to use photocells, and photocells just inherently don't know who actually crossed the beam.
Yeah.
You're always going to have the issues where photocells are just a really poor device. Like there's no way around that. Just this photocells just are terrible. And so we've actually made progress on that front with Nordic Canada. They have agreed that, you know what, for the vast majority of tier 3 and even tier 2 races, the provincial level races, if you just took the chip time as your primary time, you haven't actually affected the race fairness at all. Like if somebody lunges with the wrong foot, okay, you might have the wrong order on a really close finish, but you're most likely going to go to a camera in that case anyway. And other sports like biathlon already have the culture where they just take the chip time and they just tell the athlete, you got to lunge with the right foot. It's up to you. You pick the foot you want it on. So it's not our role to tell people that they should start timing with chip only, but I am glad that Nordic Canada at least is allowing the concept, because life gets so much easier when you don't have to deal with photocells. I mean, you would still have a start wand, and start wands I still think have a place, but they're much easier to deal with just in general. So yeah.
I did have another question earlier, and I'm just going to ask if you don't mind. Can I use one summit as the main as well as the backup with 2 different inputs?
So you can, as far as Nordic Canada is concerned, for tier 1 and 2. For FIS races, they insist on having separate devices for A, B, and C. So I don't think most of the clubs in Ontario will be dealing with FIS races very often, so don't worry about that. So yes, you can use A and B into the same summit. It does violate a little bit of our redundancy policy in the sense that, like, if you lose that summit and both your primer and your backup are going to the same summit, what are you left with? But in general, when you're talking about redundancy, the key thing is that the different systems you are employing should be very different from each other. So like, I don't want to have all my my primary and my backup both being summits. I want to have like my primary being a summit and my backup being, let's say, the chips, and then a third backup being a camera, because those are 3 such different technologies. A camera is going to make totally different assumptions and mistakes than a chip, and it's going to make mistakes than a human. Or so when you're thinking about backup, think about diversifying across the type of device, not just about replicating in a similar device.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Somebody had a question about those headers I was entering before. Yeah, if I'm looking at my headers, although I don't see them, if I go to print this, print, it'll automatically put in the logo and whatever jury weather information I put on my start list. So yeah, just go and edit it in the start area. Don't worry about editing it. I can configure it here, but I don't down here in my header options, but I don't want to. This is the default is display the banner set on the start list. And I don't want to, yeah, if I need to, I can override it, but don't. Okay. So what else? So we weren't planning to get into the timing side of this until Monday's course. So I kind of want to stick with that. We actually got through most of all the stuff to the results. Yeah, we got through quicker than I expected. It's only an hour. So do people have questions about what we've seen so far? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is related to a question I asked on Monday. Pardon me. I had, and Elijah answered that, and I think I figured out where I did go wrong. I had an event page disappear when the registration closed, and I understand where I went wrong there. And we used WebScore for our timing for that. Is it possible to, in future races, upload results from another, say, a CSV of result files into Zone 4 from something like WebScore?
We don't have the ability to host like PDFs or like files like that, but you can create links. So for instance, and I'm sure if you're using WebScore, there's probably a public page somewhere that you can access.
That's exactly what I did.
If you're on the event page here, so let's go to an event page. Let's go to the Ontario Cup event page. So here under my advanced settings, extra links here. So I can say add an external link, put in the text, results here, and then put in the link here. And so in this case, they put things like the WhatsApp, the Zoom links, the slides, race notices, and all that. But you can put whatever you want there. So that I think is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, that would be a lot more slick than the very clunky way that I did it in the end.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Kieran.
Hi, it's Christine. Are we covering the uploading results on Monday?
Yeah, I think the idea with Monday was where we would actually start to receive times into the race file and starting to see that. Yeah, I mean, we could go further. I wasn't set up to. I can introduce you to some of those concepts.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I've done it a few times, and I've done it a few different ways. So I just want to see what's the best way. So fastest, best way.
Yeah, I mean, it's so dependent on what hardware you have available and what level of race you're running. It can be as simple as running the Zone 4 Go app, where you just simply bib number enter, on the app, and then those are going in automatically. But that's only as good as how fast you can type. So if you have a pack of 10 people crossing the finish line, that's no different than, say, WebScore, where it's like how fast can you actually hit a button to process, right? So app-based timing has sort of an inherent density limit where you just run out. So anytime you get into higher density finishes, that's when you're getting into either chips or throwing more redundancy out there in terms of recording an order of sequence of times and an order of sequence of bibs, say on paper, and then relaying those in afterwards, and using the times grid and associate those times. So yeah, that's the first question to ask is basically what's my max density going to be, and that will determine what hardware you need to use.
Actually, I what I meant is creating a race and uploading from a previous race.
Uploading from previous race. Can you explain?
So you'll have a race on Saturday and a race on Sunday,
Okay.
and you'll take the results from Saturday,
Okay.
and you're gonna do your start list according to your results on Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. In that case, are you looking to create a pursuit start or just simply seeding like a mass start based on?
Well, actually, I'll just give you an
Saturday.
example. An individual to a mass.
Okay. Okay. So
Chevron.
in that case, is that a Nordic Canada sanctioned race where you're seeding based on the first day? Because Nordic Canada's mass start procedure is supposed to use points. Not
Yeah.
to use
So the first day, well, I'll give you an example. So first day is interval. We do the CPL, do the seating according. That's fine.
Mhm.
The next day is the Chevron start. You're placed according to your results from the day prior.
But that's not a Nordic Canada rule.
No, but like we had a race, and then I had an issue with taking. I don't. Well, actually, 1 year was a different story, and the next year it was the following time I did it. It wasn't uploading my results properly, so we had to manually seed everybody into the racers numbers all by hand.
Okay.
But then we had an issue with the CPL points afterwards for somebody to collect those points.
Yeah.
So
Typically, like as far as I understand, the way in which Nordic Canada mass starts are to be run is a mass start is supposed to be ordered by their points, not based on the previous day. You can do it. You could order by your previous day, and I'll just show you how I do that right here. I just call this Sunday.
Mhm.
And Al White here. We've been doing that for a number of years for U14 and U12. Yeah, I know we used to call them midgets, but that's who we do it for.
Okay.
Because they don't have a lot of points.
Yeah.
It was actually the youth championship. So I did it for 2 years. First year, yeah.
So in this case, instead of saying I'm getting them from the registration, I say get it from a previous race. Okay, and then I choose which result set I want to bring them from. My challenge here is that by going down this route, I'm kind of doing it for everybody in the race, not just.
Yes, that was the issue.
And that's where you're kind of mixing concepts, right?
Okay, yeah, because I had to do a lot of manual work, so I was trying to I was hoping that there was a shorter version of it because it's very time consuming when you do it this way.
Mm-hmm. We definitely have some new tools that could help. We built a feature in the past year. It's not available on this scene. I can show you how to access separately, but basically what it allows us to do is upload a single column of data into a race. So for example, let's say you created a race and you're missing some piece of information and you want to just update all the racers with that one field. So this is an example where it would be useful, where you'd say you create a custom field in the race saying, Saturday's result, and you export your U14 results from Saturday, and you just create a CSV file that has first name, last name, and rank. Okay. You go to this. You go to this feature, and what you say is you import. You choose a CSV file, and it says, okay, how do you want to match? And you say, I want to match by name. And then it says, what column do you want to pull from? And you say, well, I want to pull in this rank field. And it says, okay, and what column do you want to update? And you say, I want to update my Saturday rank field in my race. And boom, it does it. And so then once you have that, then when I'm building Sunday's race and I'm building the start list, I could say, instead of ordering by CPL points field for U14, I could say I want to order by my Saturday rank field.
So I think that's what I did. Like I'm trying to remember.
Well, this feature didn't exist. So the automatic feature, you effectively did that manually. You probably had to manually enter all those ranks.
Yes. So we took everybody. Yes, that's what happened. So we took everybody, every person, we took their rank, we added that field in the racers field, and then that's how we sorted their ranks.
Yeah.
The only issue we had afterwards, it was fine, but it was very time consuming. So this option is available now that we could just.
It's a special feature. I'll have to show you how to do this update. It's on what we call our next infrastructure, which is next.zone4.ca. Next.zone4.ca is where we put all of our more advanced tooling that's still in the works. People were in general getting a little uptight about how often the Zone 4 code base was changing. And so what we essentially did is we froze development on the main race timing branch. So it really has not changed for a long time. And it's made it very stable, but it means that if there's any advanced features we need to add, we can't add it to it, or we won't touch it. So we put those on next. And so we only tell people to go to next if they need to do one specific thing, and then they can do it in there, then you go back to the production side. But it allows us to kind of balance still innovating, still building features without risking the production side.
Could you run this as 2 race files at the same time? So you could do the U14s using one method and then use do the CPL points for the older people?
It is possible, and there's certainly times where we'll run race files, multiple race files in a given day, but it means that all of your start list publishing, your course setup, result setup, all of your setup time is duplicated, and that gets tiresome. And it means also on race day you're having to flip back and forth, and it's really easy to make a mistake where you make some configuration change in one of your race files, but you forget to in the other one. So if possible, I say avoid it unless you've got like a big time gap between your races that you can say it's an easy like switch to say, okay, we're done with this first race file, we've done the hour, okay, because so if possible, avoid it. But yes, it is always possible to split race files.
Can you actually run them at the same time? Because like all your timing devices use a specific code for the club, so they wouldn't care which race file, I don't think, eh?
Yes, you could run them at the same time, but I think you're going to run into problems with the fact that your times grids will show times. It'll come into both times grids, but in one race file, those people don't have a bib. In the other race file, they do. So there'll be kind of unassigned times in one side and maybe assigned times in the other. And I think in general, you run into problems with that. So as a rule of thumb, you do not have overlapping race windows.
Right, makes sense.
It creates problems.
Okay, and then just to go back to my about how I had to do it manually.
Yep.
There was an issue afterwards that Nordic Canada was trying to get the CPL points, and I guess because of the way that we did it, or that I had to do it, the CPL points didn't get carried over, and supposedly it was a shit show.
It's not the points that would be an issue, it'd be the license. The license would be the problem.
It's been a while, but I know that I asked for clarification because somebody from Zone 4 asked me why I did it that way or how come, and then I gave an explanation, but I never got an answer back on if there was a better way or. Yeah,
I mean, I think we were like last year, Dave Dyer did all of he's been done it for the past 10 years. He did all of the importing into the CPL system, and Dave Dyer has now retired. And that the next unfortunate logical person to do that job is me. So I'm going to be paying the price for any quirks in the system, so to speak. So the good thing is that means the quirks will probably get fixed. So yeah, this is going to be a painful year, but it'll be better by the end of the year.
Well, I think that was the issue. Dave couldn't, for some reason, he couldn't get that information.
Yeah.
Because of the way that we had to do that start list the next day, according to the previous results.
So these are all things that I'm going to have to encounter this year. And that's an example where I'd probably use that new tool next to say, I need to import a missing license field that's not in this data, and I need to put it in there. And so I'll match on name, and I'll just put it in there, right? So we have tools. These are tools that Dave Dyer would have never known about, right? Or they weren't available. So this year, we're probably going to have to build tools to solve some of these things. But I think we're in a better position to build them than Nordic Canada was previously. So yeah, just bear with us as we get through it.
Oh, that's okay. That was good to know.
Yeah.
And we always figure it out a way, but It just, it's time. It was very time consuming. It took a lot of time putting all those people in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Can't wait to get that tool.
Yeah, Al, go ahead.
Two things, master's age adjustment and paranordic adjustments according to classification. Bearing in mind they're both sensitive to the technique being skied, and I haven't even noticed that we have talked about the technique being skied in any of the registration information. So do you have it in there somewhere? Because I couldn't find it in the help file.
Yeah, parafactors are definitely a thing. There's a feature for it. If I go here, so there's a good document on this. Parafactor. I think it's called time factoring. Time factoring for Paralympic and Paranordic races. This tells you how to enable it and how to set a time factor. I think it's called Parafactor. Right now, these screenshots are a little bit old, but generally speaking, this is what we were doing the last 2 days here in Canmore for the Continental Cup. I don't know if we have to type in those parafactors, which generally speaking for para, there's not that many para racers, so it's not a big deal to get the factor. It doesn't automatically put that in based on their classification. Yeah, so there's no automaticness to it yet. The volume just hasn't been enough to warrant trying to automate that. But the field is there and the calculations happen, and it does the calculations correctly. So,
and master skiers like Ontario Masters might be about 60 skiers.
So the parafactor field is supported in the sense you can use it for other time factoring purposes, but there's no automatic feature where it calculates that factor based on age.
Guess it's a good job I kept the chart.
Yeah. Okay. Kyle, you have a question about how accurate or inaccurate tips for using cell phones and tablets for a lot bit. So as far as accuracy is concerned, when you're using a cell phone, make sure that you've got the cell phone set or a tablet set to use network time. That will ensure that it's probably within 1 second accurate. And then the other part of accuracy is just how accurate your volunteer is hitting keys on a keyboard. There's two ways I would say you can really use tablets. You can use it where you're doing bib number enter for each person, but then you're always going to be limited by what happens when you got a pack of people. And the other way is to treat it more like a summit plunger, where you're just hitting the plus button, right? Plus. And of course, you can use a combination of those. So if there's any sort of lop it where you're expecting potentially high volume, I would set up a volunteer just doing plus, and another volunteer who's doing bib number enter, and then maybe even a third one that you tell, look, I want you to do plus, but then when there's a really obvious person and you're 100% sure that's the bib, do bib number enter. And so they essentially work like posting. And that way you essentially get 3 sets of times. The person doing bib number enter, you want to, you obviously take that with a grain of salt. And you probably also want to have somebody doing a paper bib order, so you can go back to it saying, here's my backup. And I think in that case, my third phone, it's debatable whether I actually have it doing bib entry or whether I just set up the video camera. You know, this past year we had, we were training up a bunch of, we're doing all the Ontario cycling races and we're doing road races, and we had the Rapid Cam as our primary timing device. In the one race, the Rapid Cam, we couldn't get it to work. And so me and the university students were there, and we decided, well, let's see what we can do with our cell phones. And so we just downloaded some apps, tried just the standard video app in the phone. And by the end of the day, we got to the point where we were telling 0.005 of a second difference on photo finishes just using standard video apps on a phone. And the best thing about it is that we had one phone looking across the tires to get the tire difference, and another phone looking at the backs of the racers to get their bib numbers. And I'm like, wow, like we actually have a better view of perspective on this than even a Rapid Cam. Rapid Cam's only one angle. This way I've got 2 different angles. And I was like, man, like this is just a cell phone we pull out of a pocket. So, you know, throwing a cell phone out there and just putting it on record and letting it sit for like an hour, is one hell of a cheap, easy way to have backup. It's easy to review the contents of that video file. You can delete it afterwards if you have to. But a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so like, it's just so simple and so easy to throw it out there. I would always recommend putting up cameras and just throwing your cell phone out there.
So what kind of apps are you talking about? Because I mean, a cell phone obviously has a video recording app.
Yeah, we end
built
up just finding that. Like even we tried using like the 60 frames per second, and we found that it actually was just better, just standard. Even 30 frames a second was enough.
Oh, so just the regular camera app. You mean,
just regular camera app. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We tried some of the photo finish apps and all that kind of stuff, but in general, we found it just better to just use straight video, and we were just using just cheap Android phones. Yeah.
So when you want to review something, you have to wait till the end of the race to go back to look at it, or would you?
Okay, so that's one thing. Because we're doing cycling races, they finish in packs, and then there's nothing happening for 10 minutes. So we could easily go back and review. In the ski race, you're right. You don't have that option of going back to review. We would treat it. Yeah, I wouldn't expect a camera to be used as something you review right away. It was more just like it's a safety net. It's just to know that it's there recording, that you've got it. But generally, even within ski races, you've got lulls where you could maybe swap out cameras and bring one in to review something. But yeah, the intention is not that you review it often. The intention is that you've got a safety net.
Okay. And so this whole option of using tablets and cell phones and stuff like that, if they're on a not so great network connection, doesn't really affect the times at all. It's
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, the time base, of course, will drift slightly, but that drift is going to be less than the accuracy of the human operator. So yeah, as long as they're set to network time and they got a network time recently, like that morning, that should be fine.
Okay.
And you can just take two phones and put them up side by side, but put up the clock app and just see, are the times running at the same time? I mean, that'll tell you. Yeah, that'll tell you.
Okay. And if they go offline for a little period of time, they'll just cache.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yeah. The Zone 4 Go app is meant to work offline and record, even if you have no connection. So that's fine.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'm just getting back into this after like 15 years. I use your old software, but last year I was thrown into a race and looked at the software for the first time in 15 years. So it was quite a surprise.
Yeah. And even if you're using like the Summit Bridge, even it's designed to work offline, and that you can record times, and then once you have a connection, it'll send them up. Of course, you can't time the race until you're online. In that case, the Summit Bridge is for you, where you essentially have to be online, but like it can actually record and store things, even if you don't have a connection.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions?
And it only works on Android, correct?
That's right. It's only an Android app. Unfortunately, Apple controls the hardware too greatly. And so any app that's, say, using up too much resources, and they'll deprioritize it in the background. So like, for instance, we're trying to read Bluetooth at a very high rate, and even Android now is starting to clamp down and trying to limit how much CPU we're using, because our app uses up all your battery life because we need it to, and they don't like that. So yeah, we're not a standard app. So yeah, unfortunately, it may come to pass in some point in the future where we have to get away from at least the Play Store version of Android and use like, not unofficial app status basically. But for now, yes, it's only Android.
Okay. Can you time from a Windows computer as well?
Yes. Well, when you say time, it's browser-based software. So you can use the browser on any computer, Mac or Windows, or Linux or whatever. And there is the ability to have a keypad entry device. So if I'm in my course setup here and I say my devices, I can say here time, is it record times on this computer. This creates what we would call like a keypad device here in the browser, and that's essentially equivalent to an Android device. So I can do bib1 enter, and I could use my keypad on my I think it's because this race was set to, I set this race originally as to happen on the 19th. And so I don't think it's showing me times because I'm kind of outside my race window on the 19th. I should have set the race to start today. But yeah, the idea is this acts exactly like the keyboard. And so this would work on Mac or Windows or any other operating system. This is a no-no to change the date after you've assigned your start list, because the start times I've already assigned are on the 19th, and now I've just changed the race to the 22nd. So if I go to my start list now, it's gonna be like, you fail, error. So yeah, don't change your race date, but I will, for this purpose, do this. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely a little, if you use the old software, this idea that everything is essentially based on a date and a time, it takes a little bit of getting used to. But it does make sense when you start to get into it, especially if you have race files like, starting one day, ending the next day, like times are essentially dates and times in reality. So let's go to our course setup. Oh yeah, so this is my timing grid. Times grid. So I'm just going to put this over here. I'm going to put this on one side, and I'm going to put the other on the other side here. Times this computer. Timing. So if I do 111 enter, there's a time there. Liam McDonald. 112 enter. Yeah, so you can see here that as I entered them on the keypad here, they show up in my times grid here on the right, on the left.
Okay. This is using your Windows time, which is synced with Windows.
Assuming you've set up, to use the default in Windows is to use network time. So,
Okay.
But yes, you're only as good as how accurate your laptop is.
Oh, cool. All right. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah, I'll get into some of the, if you want me to, I can continue on some of the timing stuff. Yeah, it's up to you. It's just something that we don't have quite the, I don't have all the hardware set up, but at least some of the concepts I can introduce. So for instance, let's say you want to deal with did not starts. In general, with did not starts, once the start list is published, we never remove the people. So we go ahead and mark them as did not start once we're notified of them. So typically we go here and let's say, typically you'll have like a whiteboard behind you in the timing room where you're just making notes of like, here's all my did not starts. But in here, you can just type them in. So say I'll take bib 22, I'll say 34, 66 did not start, and so on. So that's one way of doing it. I can also do that with say did not finishes. I've got like a 77 is did not finish, so disqualified, and so on. So there's one way to enter them. You can also click on an eraser. So let's say I'm going to my start list here and I say, oh, 5 is did not start. So you can click on the eraser, go to the timing tab, and say did not start. You'll see here, these are the people I already marked. They show up in the start list, did not start. In general, I kind of wait for the person to actually not start before I mark them to not start, because sometimes there's miscommunication and the coaches say, oh, the person's not starting, and then they change their mind. And if I've already marked them as did not start, then they just end up like, but they actually raced. So it's a little embarrassing to make that mistake. So I'd rather wait till see that they haven't started, and then I'm just confirming the fact, okay, yeah, we were told they did not start. If they actually didn't start, then I'll mark them as did not start. Oh yeah, you asked about how to insert somebody last minute. So let's say we'll take somebody, we're going to start somebody at 10:07, brand new person in this U14 girls. So if I just go to racers, create a new racer. I'll put my daughter in here. I don't remember the number right now, but I know the time. Or the category was Friday U14 girls. Create this racer. So there she is here. So we know where she's going to get, well, we can't use bib 15. So we'll just give her a really high bib number. 999. Chip number Z99. And we'll put in a scheduled start of 7. There we go. 99 starting at 10:07. And there's their chip. So that we have inserted somebody without actually reassigning bibs or times to anybody else.
Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I got one more.
Okay.
So in the nickel loppet, or the Sophie Mandarin loppet, it's a Sudbury Fitness Challenge race, but it's also I don't know, like I said, part of the Ontario list as well. But the categories are entirely different. So you have like age categories like 10 to 12, 10 to 12, I guess 13 to, or 10, 11, and then 12, 13, and then 14, 15. So they're all like 2-year age gaps categories. And on one set of results, they're all even age categories, and the other set of results are all odd. So they're off by a year. So if I simply allow the registration to come in and not let them choose a category, because of course in the end there's 2 categories, just ask their age and gender, then in the results I can then create 2 sets of results, I think.
Yeah.
For each of those types.
Yeah, let's do that in this case. We've got a calculated age and we've got a gender here. Okay, and that's all we need to do this. So let's go to our results. So the first set of results were all based on that Friday field, but we can create another set of results here. This is a this challenge. And again, it's going to default to the courses, but then my next field is going to be calculated gender first, and then I'll do calculated age. Okay, and so for calculated age, I get to specify the ranges. So in this case, it's put in 0 to 9, 10 to 19, but let's say I'll do 0 to 9. Oops, lost me. Sorry about that. Gender and calculated age. So let's say 0 to 9, and they'll do 10 to 12, you said?
Yeah, I can't remember what they are now,
Or
but
10 to 11,
yeah, it was like 10 and 11-year-olds,
13.
and then 12, 13-year-olds.
Yep.
And then, but then the other one, instead of being whatever, 10 and 11s, it's 11 and 12s, and then 12 and 13.
Yeah. So in this case, like I can define whatever I want here. I can say, 10 to 13, 13 to 99, like just whatever ranges you want. Okay. And as soon as I click outside that, it shows you the permutations below. So I usually click only groups with racers, because I just don't want to create groupings unless I have people that match that criteria. And so here you can see what it's done here, calculated age. So create the result set, view results, 3K male calculated age. Now, here's a little pro tip here. It'd be really annoying if I had to go and change like all this, get rid of this word calculated in all these. But that's based on the field name. So if I go back to racers, custom racer fields, and change this calculated age to just simply age.
Okay.
And now I go to my results. Configure. Create new racer groups. Now it's just saying age.
Okay.
Just simpler.
So the trick is in registrations to not even ask for categories.
In this case, it'd be interesting because you said it was both an Ontario Cup as well as this fitness challenge, right?
Well, it's not really Ontario Cup, but it's whatever the.
So if you don't want people to choose their category, then don't ask for it. Then you just simply, you ask for age, gender, and then you put them in, slot them in. But there's no opportunity to race up in this situation, right? Whereas in an Ontario Cup, people may want to race up. So that's why you give them a choice. And that's the fundamental difference. So yeah, there's lots of races like running races. They don't give people a choice. You can't race up in a running race. It's like, no, you're age 12, you're racing at 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any way to fix? Hopefully, never come across this problem again. I guess. But so last year I did the results for this race, but I just took the previous year's registration form, I guess, which of course had about 50 different categories already in it. So when I tried after the race to create this second set of results, I was able to do it, I think, based on calculated age, but then of course they had all this essentially garbage in the results because it said a category which wasn't actually what they're calculated in. You know what I mean?
I mean, it would only have done that if, let's say, your course groups were defined based on that category field, right?
Which they might have been actually.
It might have been, yeah. And again, this is one of the reasons why I stay away from when it asks when you're creating this race, it says, do you want to create categories? And you can base it on a field. I kind of stay away from that because in general for ski races, I really want the flexibility to create potentially a separate grouping for my starts, a separate grouping for my courses, and a separate grouping for my results. And once you've defined categories, it kind of takes that away from you. It tries to treat it a little bit like the old software.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
But I generally, like, once you get used to this idea of creating the groupings dynamically for both starts, courses, and results, once you get used to that, it's really easy. I find it's easy for me to. I like being able to like think about it in terms of that's the registration data. Here's how I organize the registration data. Here's how I want to create the groups. I don't like personally like abstracting that away from myself, but the feature's there. But
yeah, I think the previous people, well, they did it because that's what they knew how to do, I guess. But it was after the course that I realized that there must be a better way.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Did you say you had a document that had a lot of these tips on it you were going to share?
There was 2 documents that I thought were useful. One was, I'll put it here in the chat. This one here about. We wrote it last year, and it was about this 3 p.m. cutoff that we wanted to sort of become the norm across the country, that we were publishing start lists at 3 p.m. the day before a race. But this goes through everything about like when do you want to do things, what each list should contain, where your emails to coaches should be like. So this one I'll post here in the chat. And then the other one was this one. This document I find really helpful. It overviews, starts off with equipment. It's like, what hard goods do I need? It is designed for FIS races, so it has a lot of equipment that you may don't need, but at least by asking the question like, hey, do I need a start horn? Who's going to bring it? Like, maybe you do need a horn. A clock. Do we need a clock at the start? So it's just kind of goes through all the key pieces of hardware that are important for race timing. And in our case, we go through this checklist with every organizer that we're bringing equipment to, just to make sure that it's defined who's bringing it. Are we bringing it, or is the local organizing committee bringing it? So it's got equipment, and it's got links in those equipment to like information about that equipment if necessary. The next section is about setup timeline. It has a bunch of things that should be done before the race day, all the, day before, making sure all the equipment's working, what to label, and then race day. This timeline is, I find, really helpful. It details in sort of 15-minute blocks what you should be doing and what you should be setting up in the 3 hours before your race time. And again, this is based on a FIS race, but I refer to this myself on race days, because if I'm not within 5 or 10 minutes of this timeline, I know I'm starting to get in trouble. And I could know like an hour and a half before the race, like, oh shoot, we're actually getting tight for time because we're not at that point in the checklist yet. So it's a really good way to define exactly what has to be deployed and when. And one of the things I think you'll find is interesting here is that we try to have almost all of the hardware deployed on the snow about an hour before the start. And this didn't used to be the case, because in particular the Summit timers, their alkaline batteries would start to beep at you within an hour of getting cold. And so people used to get into this mindset of, oh, we'll bring them out 5 minutes before the start. But we now have solved that by using these new lithium-ion batteries that are rechargeable. And so you can put out those summits like an hour ahead of time. It can be -20 and it'll go all day without beeping at you. And so I love to have all the equipment in place an hour to go. I have it starting to test. So you're starting to actually rehearse, making sure the data is flowing back to the computer. All the wires are connected properly. You haven't, put the A port and the B port and all that stuff, like making sure it's all good. Because the last hour, there's always stuff coming at you from the coaches or from the officials, and they're distracting you. And so you really want to have all the hardware in place. So this checklist I find really invaluable. And then the final thing is something that clubs are always asking us is, what volunteers do I need and what is their role? And so we've written out a list of specific positions and a description of what each person is doing. Same thing both inside and outside on the snow. And this is just really helpful for the clubs to be able to start to look at, okay, we need these roles, who are good for these roles. So yeah, this is the second document I'm going to put out there. That's really good reading.
Just in case I wasn't clear, those batteries are fantastic, using them for all the devices.
Yeah. When we designed our Go chip activator, one of the major motivating factors was, how do we not produce like what the summits were at the time, which is like something that you were worried about battery life. So we put like twice as much battery life into an activator than was required, because I was like, you know what, I want to deploy that thing 3 hours before the start and not even think about it. Because you do not want to be concerned about something as silly as battery life when you got so many other things you got to be worrying about race day. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, I would encourage people to get in there and play around. You can create races in your club account. You can use any Android phone or the keypad here to practice timing. And we have documentation on timing task. We've got tutorials here that walk you through like creating race files, how to set up, basically everything we went through today, but in really simple terms, in terms of like just creating a simple race, record some times, and so you can go through, like I'll put up this timing task one, as an example of the kind of tutorial material we have available to guide you through, creating your own race and stuff like that. And like I said, as Elijah said in the last course, you really can't cause any harm by creating a race and timing things. Just to correct one thing he said on the last call, he said that you can't delete test mode registrations. You can actually delete test mode registrations. So yeah, you're welcome to experiment with that. The only thing with test mode registrations is you can't test importing that data into a race. So if you want to test with actual real race data, you're better off working within your club account and working with, like, say, a registration from last year. and just practice importing that into race, creating a start list out of it, and getting familiar with that. Oh, somebody asked about what is test mode. Test mode is in registrations. In registrations, all registrations start off in test mode, and they you can practice registering, but nothing actually gets charged and nothing actually gets recorded in the registration until it's live. So it just, most clubs like to go through it, send it to club executives to try out before it ever goes live, and then once you're sure it's good, then you publish it goes live. There's no equivalent concept in races. Oh yeah, but that brings up the point about somebody asked about why we always review registrations before they go live. That's just to catch any errors before people actually starting to pay money. If you're creating a race, you can have the option here in the courses tab to request review. This sends it to Zone 4 staff, and you say within a day or so, somebody will review it and provide feedback. So you can request review here. And that, again, the idea is that you set up everything before race day. So if you set up everything and you send it to review, we can go in there and look at it and say, yep, okay, your start list looks good, your course setup looks good, your results look good, and then your confidence on race day goes up hugely to know that everything's set up, everything's good to go. You're just waiting for times to come in. Yeah, a question about next.zone4.ca. So next.zone4.ca is actually a URL that is accessible. It's a parallel branch of our code that runs. The idea with that infrastructure was that it's a separate set of servers running a separate set of code, and so it allows us to develop new features and to test those features without impacting customers. And the idea being that we already have our next infrastructure deployed for registrations. So in a given week, we're fixing things and we're deploying them over to Next, and allows us to go and test to make sure those features are correct before they get rolled out the following week. And we're not there with races yet. We're probably still a year out before we get into that rhythm with races. But the idea being with races is that if we're going to time races, we're always timing on the next branch, so that we're timing using code that the public will see, our customers will see, like say a few weeks later, knowing that if something goes wrong, we can always fall back to the production code. So again, this is all based on, we received the feedback loud and clear that people wanted a bit more stability out of Zone 4, and so creating parallel servers, parallel infrastructure, parallel code bases to allow us to still test and iterate while still having customers on a main production branch is one of the ways we're doing that. Yeah, somebody wanted to request review. It's on the courses tab here. So you've got your tabs across top courses, and you go to the bottom here, and it's called request review. And request review here. Oh yes, somebody wanted to see how to open the Windows timing pad. Here on the course, if I close it here in the courses tab, record times on this computer. That's how I open it. Yep. I think it's also here too. I think I can do it from the timing tab too here to record times on keypad. Yeah, there. I can also open it from there. Same thing. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Unless any more questions, thank you very much for all the time and giving us this evening, and look forward to the next one on Monday, getting into the actual times grids and seeing times coming in and how to process times on the times grids. That's certainly where all the fun exists. So, but yeah, hopefully, and by all means, reach out anytime directly. You can get hold of me or Elijah or our support inbox. Thank you.
Thank you.